Carey, it's a thrill to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Carey. How you doing? Good.
Doing fantastic. So you have done so much in your life. You're an actor, both TV and movies. That crossover wasn't always easy, but you seem to be able to go very fluidly between both. You've hosted game shows, play in the NFL, multiple seasons, multiple teams. You've written a book, and you're also an exceptional artist. I'm just curious, what brings you the most joy in all of that?
Oh, wow. That's like asking me if I have a favorite child. You know what I mean? Actually, it's wild because, the reality is when I do things, I go into them letting everyone know that I'm not giving up the other stuff. You know what I mean? It was really, when I signed on to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the NBC tended to be really, they were dogged about keeping everyone's rights for everything. And I was like, hey, look, I work a lot. I do a lot of different things. And if I'm going to do this show, you're going to have to accept that because there's no way I can be happy just doing one thing. And they were with it. Where I had seen on other shows, even with the network, that people were like, man, they got my rights and they won't let me do this, they won't let me do that. But I went in with that understanding that, hey, I want to try other things. I want to host. I want to, I'm an artist. I design furniture. I do, there's so many things that I want to do. And I usually have to go into that with every new venture or with every new agreement or relationship. I let everybody know that, hey, Terry Crews is a multi-hyphenate. You know what I mean? I have so many different personalities and I love them all. There's no one that stands above the other because it's so wild because even when I wrote my book, there was an intersectionality from one thing to the next. Like one thing tips off another thing that tips off another thing. And if you if you take out one of those things, like if you take out art, all of a sudden the whole thing just starts to fall down. You know what I mean? For me. And it's so, let me tell you, that was the only way to live for me. And I would easily be making no money, but doing everything I want to do.
Did you? Yeah, because, your book, Tough, which, by the way, if anybody hasn't read it yet, I would encourage the audiobook. You did an unbelievable job delivering that. I thought it was fantastic, but goes into your childhood. It's sort of an autobiography. But, you did have various interests. You were interested in art at the same time as football and then kind of got your break in TV. And then, well, I guess the first was movies, actually, right? Which was the first a Schwarzenegger film?
Well, actually, in fact, it was TV first.
It was TV first. Okay.
Yeah. What was incredible was that I never wanted to be an actor at all. I mean, it's so crazy. My wife was the musical theater major and the whole thing. And she was like, so I had Broadway dreams and the whole deal. My dream was to be a creator, to be behind the scenes. Like once I saw Star Wars in 1977, I thought, oh man, if I could be a director, or I would have been super happy just working at Industrial Light and Magic, working on special effects and being a creator like that way. But I just wanted to be involved behind the scenes. That was my whole intent. And I just kept I was doing security in LA after playing football and the whole thing. And people just kept coming up to me saying, man, you got a great look. You should try this acting thing. And I was like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It did not interest me at all. And I resisted it. And then finally, there was a guy that I really trusted. He was a really cool dude. He was a police officer who worked with Billy Blanks at the time. That was the Tybo guy. I don't know if you remember Tybo. That was real. And he was a really cool guy that I met in front of this bar that I was bouncing at. And he said, hey man, I have this opportunity. You got to try it. It's a TV show called Battle Dome that Billy Blanks is doing. He's basically advisor for, but they're looking for new guys and you would be great. And I was like, oh boy, here we go again. but he was a nice guy. Like I really trusted him and I really liked him. So I went to my wife and I was like, should I finally try this? And she was like, what else do you got? You're doing security. I mean, it can't hurt. You know what I mean? I was like, all right. People just keep saying this. And man, the first thing I ever auditioned for, I went down to Santa Monica. They put us through this obstacle course and then tried to see our acting ability. And we were all big like wrestlers and the whole thing. And I got the job. I got the job. And I was like, all of a sudden, I was on TV. It was a late night show. It was American Gladiators on steroids. When I say that, I played this character named T Money, who had a gold chain and the whole thing, but they would put me in this cage and set the ends on fire. And I would get in the cage and they would rotate the cage and I would face 3 contestants one at a time and they would try to pull me out of the cage. And it was crazy. I was getting bloodied every show and the whole thing, but it was easier than the NFL. and I found my calling. It was really amazing. I can't tell you, Carey, how nervous I was because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea, but I also had no way back. Like here was an opportunity because I was already at rock bottom. So it was really only one way out was the light that you saw at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? And that was it. And little did I know it would lead to over 25 years in entertainment. I didn't know that. And then there came the Schwarzenegger opportunity because they saw me on that show and gave me the opportunity to audition as a heavy on the Schwarzenegger movie. And I got that. That was the first movie audition I ever did. It was I was turning around like, wow, this Hollywood is easy. And then I got crushed over the next 4 or 5 years. You know what I mean? Ended up losing my house, totally losing perspective on so many things. There is it's like an obstacle that comes right along with early success.
You know, there's a lot of directions we could go, and you were very generous with your time for this. But let me pick up here. You mentioned the NFL, and I want to ask you about your physical disciplines too, because I'm always interested in sort of the story behind what made the Terry Crews we know today. Whether people know you from the movies or Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or Everybody Hates Chris, or whether they know you from America's Got Talent, right, where you've been for the last few years. But you call in your book, if I got this quote right, the NFL is prison with money.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. What was your take on the NFL? Because you played with 6-7 teams, did you not?
Yes. You have to understand, the thing about the NFL is it's probably the most competitive out of all the sports. It's probably the most competitive physically. When I say you're literally trying to take people to the ground physically by their necks, yes, you are.
Yeah.
It's a little different than the Olympics or whatever. I would say, even with wrestling, it's kind of, there's a sport to it, there's an art to it, the whole thing, but football, it's all about aggression and it's about anger. And it also, it was one of the few ways out of the inner city for most young black men. And you have to understand, it was kind of like football was expected in a lot of ways. It was a thing where any big guy, it's almost as if there was a black guy coming up in the city who all of a sudden was 6'9", instantly he's supposed to go to the NBA. You know what I mean? It was like, you're 6'9", and if you're like, I want to be a doctor, they'd be like, what are you doing? You play in the NBA first, with a very athletic man, like, kid such as me, football was the way out of Flint, Michigan for me, even though I actually didn't like football that much. I'll be honest with you. I was an artist. I loved to paint and draw, and I had visions of filmmaking and all this stuff, but the problem is that, the term starving artist was an actual true definition of what that career was. You weren't going to make any money, and you weren't going to go out and do anything. And then on top of that, I didn't really see a lot of people from my city being very successful at art. You know what I mean? What I would do is do my art, and they would put it on screen. They would make screen printed T-shirts out of it. And, I'd get $25. I mean, that was the extent of like how I saw art actually making money. I didn't see myself as like, oh man, this painting going for $20,000. I mean, that was just like, that's not going to happen. But football was accessible. It was a way to go. I had the strength to do it. And I said, okay, this is going to be my way out of Flint, Michigan. Now you have to understand too, Flint, Michigan was going through an amazing upheaval, horrible upheaval. I mean, the demise of the auto industry, everything was collapsing around us. Right after the gas crisis, all through the 80s, General Motors went from being the number one corporation in the world to just barely hanging on, and then there was all this competition from all the other car companies. And then at the same time, there was the rise of the crack epidemic, which, man, people went right from getting laid off from the factory into the drug game, which really exacerbated this whole like demise of the city. And I watched it, and it's still been going through it. I mean, the water crisis and all this stuff, it's literally a shell of what it was. All of my memories in Flint, Michigan are gone. I mean, there's not a standing high school. The places I used to go don't stand anymore. The movie theaters are all done and hollowed out. They're just fields of grass. And it's kind of like having your memory wiped out, But I knew I had to get out. I knew when, because I felt this happening. And football was the way to do it. And I actually went to a school that wasn't very good at football. So I had to walk on, and I begged my parents to squeeze together enough money for me to get there. I actually had an art scholarship, a small art scholarship, $500. But see, back in, 1986, you could go to school for $3,000.
So that's a meaningful amount of money. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say $500 was a lot of money back then. It's impossible. You could actually work and go to school back in 1986. Right now, $100,000 is like, how is a kid going to do that? You can't work and go to school at the same time. So, what I did, took out a couple loans, got me a scholarship, and I was able to get in. And I walked on to the football team in hopes of earning this scholarship. In the first year, I didn't get it, and begged my mother one more time. I have to say I was very, very selfish, because I was like, you got to put this on me. And they could not afford it. My brother, sister, everybody went without. And I finally got my scholarship, and I was off to the races, and worked all the way up through college, and got myself into the NFL, which was a minor miracle.
I was across the river from you around that same time. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, right across the river from Detroit. So always cared about Detroit. And you're right. I mean, there are whole parts of the city that are just field now. And they just tore down blocks and blocks and square miles of Detroit and Flint and, Pontiac and places like that were just so challenging. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your childhood and the things that drove you, because you've always been a very physical guy and yet a very sensitive guy, right? Sensitive in art, but very physical. And I'm paraphrasing here from your book, but you say a lot of your life has been dealing with shame, judging others, and managing your anger. Can you unpack, because I think a lot of us, we get driven into leadership. Most of us, I didn't plan on being here in life. And I look at my younger leadership and I realize, some of that, I was working out some of the issues from my childhood. Yeah. And you do a beautiful, I don't want to say beautiful because it wasn't beautiful, but you do a beautiful job describing a really painful childhood that you grew up in.
Carey, let me tell you, man, it was brutal. On top of all the things that were happening outside of my house,
Mm.
All the tremendous upheaval. Inside of the house, it was worse. My father was extremely abusive. I mean, one of my earliest memories is my father knocking my mother out. And he would do it on the regular. It was something that, I actually wet the bed till I was 14 years old because we used to wake up into screaming and crying and glass breaking, and we never felt secure. I don't ever remember feeling like I knew what the next day was going to be like. It was always on edge. I was always nervous and scared. I spent so much time afraid, and it became part of my psyche. Just look out, watch out, because again, when you went out, there were drug dealers, gang members. The city was changing so fast that you had to fear out there, and then to come home and be afraid of your father being angry, and and on top of that, my mother was addicted to religion. We went to a very, very strict church, which was a Church of God in Christ, which was Pentecostal, but it was extremely prohibitive. I mean, you couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't watch. I couldn't listen to secular music. Couldn't dance. Couldn't play sports. Couldn't do anything that I actually ended up doing with my whole life. We couldn't do, And it was literally, when you talk about shame, Carey, everything was, oh my God, you're going to go to hell. And everything that it was presented to me is, why are you thinking that? If you're thinking that, you're going to go to hell. Why did you do that? Our wiring was that we were bad people. And if you didn't pray enough, if you didn't seek God enough, there was always more you could do, but you're never going to get there. Like, you'll never really be enough. So hustle, 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 and hopefully, maybe, just like Indiana Jones, you'll scoot underneath that rock, and right when that door closes, you'll make it into heaven if God sees you fit enough. So there was something that this grace that you had to earn every day. And it was exhausting. It was an exhausting because my mother was underneath it. And we spent most of our time in the church. That was the whole hub of our lives. But at the same time, my father was an alcoholic, and he also ran the streets. So he knew a lot more about what was going on with our church than my mother did. And the pastor of the church that I went to was actually, his name was Roger L. Jones. He actually wrote a book about his whole experiences. But he was actually, he had affairs in the church. He, sold crack right out of the pulpit, used crack in the pulpit, would come to church high. And everyone did everything he said. And he was, and the word was, touch not mine anointed, and here I am as a young man, just always, so first of all, as a child of an alcoholic, I became a pleaser. I became this guy who just wanted peace, man. I was like, okay, whatever my father wants, you want a beer, you want whatever you want to do, I just got to do it. But then also this religious side where, okay, I'll go to church, I'll be a good boy, I'll do whatever it takes, I'll sing in the choir. Anytime anybody wanted to, recite all the books of the Bible, I was right there to do that. I said, I got to be the best kid that ever was. But I also knew one day, that I may have to kill my father. And I had the desire to be strong, like physically, because I was scared. I was scared all the time. The whole desire to get strength came from the insecurity that I had, the constant fear of, what if somebody jumps me? What if my father attacks me? What if I go outside and get beat up? What if I just never? And then at the same time, what was even crazier, there was a serial killer going around in the Detroit area called the Oakland Child Killer, and he would specifically, like pinpoint boys, and he would kill them and dress them up and set them in the snow. And we had assemblies about it when I was a kid. Like I can't tell you how just fear was everywhere. I was scared. Everyone was scared. Everybody in the church was scared. And, and then there was talk of the rapture and the fact that, if you get caught and you're not right, they would give us books from, about the rapture, where if you were left behind, you would get your tongue cut out and you have to watch your family members get killed. And so you're talking about a 5-6-year-old boy who's just like panicked, like, oh my God. One of my earliest memories is, we were in church. And, these church services were like 4 to 5 hours long every day, like every time we went. And one day I went to sleep, and usually I would get a pinch if I went to sleep. But this time I didn't get pinched. I fell asleep, and I woke up and no one was in the sanctuary. And I flipped out. I said, oh my God, the rapture has come. And man, I'll never forget this, Carey. I ran around this church in tears, like, God, no, now I'm going to get hacked, my arms hacked off in the streets, and people are going to die. And I got to watch people get killed. And I was screaming. I was beyond myself. I ran, I heard some noise in the basement. And what had happened is church had ended and everyone went downstairs to eat. And my mother was like, what is the problem? But see, this is just one of the examples. This is why it was because I could remember it so distinctly of, oh my God, like, I'm not safe. I'm never safe. And I never, ever did. And so my attempt to be strong was an attempt to have some sort of control over my own safety. And it was a crazy, crazy life. And I mean, everything you did, like I felt guilty about listening to secular music, about actually liking it. You know what I mean? And what was so strange is that we couldn't go to the movies, but we would watch the movies when they came on TV. And I had tons of questions about that. And I was like, but okay, if we can't go to the movie, why can't we watch this? And they would be like, shut up. I had way too many questions, and let me tell you, even now, all the questions that I usually bring up get me in trouble still. And I've had nothing but questions because I'm like, why are we doing it like this? And it's like, you're ruining, don't ask too many questions, Terry, but I had nothing but questions. So I learned to just be quiet. I learned because after you get shut up, 50 million times, and it was like, stop it, just do, because I said so. That was usually everyone's response, from the people in the church, to my mother, to my father, to the gang members. It was, you can't go by here because you said you can't. And, so my art was my escape. Like, art was really where I would get in and just be by myself with pencils, crayons, colored pencils, and I just go at it. I create my own world. And I used to hear what kids were talking about in movies and stuff that they'd seen that I wish I could have went to see, and I would go home and draw them, and I would draw what I thought the movie was, and it actually helped my creativity, although very sadly. But that when I became a teenager, it started to all hit me hard that I needed to get first out of my parents' house, and then I needed to get out of Flint, Michigan.
Yeah. I'm surprised you have anything to do with faith today, but you do, right?
Yes.
Like, which,
Carey, this is what I think, because first of all, I have seen where the problem was people. The problem was not God. The problem was not the Bible. The problem was not this thing about loving each other. The problem was not Jesus. It was people. And then I started to look at how Jesus he didn't really call out the Gentiles. He always called out his own. You know what I mean? He was always like, hey, wait a minute. When I look at the Pharisees, it just reminded me of the church I went to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were people who would literally put a TV in their windowsill and watch TV in the windowsill because the back of the TV was outside of their house, and they would go around telling people, "I don't have a TV in my house." And it reminds you of when Jesus was talking about washing the outside of the cup and the inside is filthy. You know what I mean? And it was all these games and tricks and different things that people would try to catch you on. And I was like, but I was always suspicious of this. Like in my heart, I felt and I knew I didn't create myself. See, that was my thing. Like, at the bare bottom, bare basic minimum, I'm like, there's something bigger than me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's for real. Like, there's something, I didn't make any of this. I didn't make me. I didn't make this world. So something created this. Because let me tell you, I came about it with the mindset of an artist, as a designer, as there was a plan. You could see plans. You could see things organized in certain ways. And I said, wait a minute. So maybe the problem's us. Maybe people are putting, now I noticed there were so many people putting too many things in on it, and all the extras and all the stacking of all these other things. I'm like, wait a minute, man. You got to understand this too, Carey, that in the church that I went to, there was a phrase that would always be used. And they would come up to you and be like, God is telling me that you need to, and then they go into a nice little list, Mm-hmm. And if you started anything with God is telling me, well, you can't refute it. And especially to a young man, because I'm a kid. So it was like, God's telling me that you need to da 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 da, and so you're supposed to take all this stuff as law. But then I started to realize again, especially as a teenager, I was like, you know what? God didn't tell you that. There were a moment where I was like, wait a minute. Because I'll never forget another pastor that I went to. He said, God's telling me that football is evil because you're trying to hurt people. Now, basketball, however, is great because we play it every Friday night. And I went, no. And again, here I am, 16 years old, and these are adults telling me that this is the rules. And I'm going, but that's not true. It's obvious it's not true. So I started to realize that the problem was not God. And the problem was always what people added and the things that they took away and the things that they would say and reveal and the things that they would literally tell you that God's saying, interpolated through him. I'm like, why can't God just tell me? That was one of my things. I was like, why does God need you? I always had these questions, I had a lot of questions again, and I would get shut up because I said so. And I finally stopped asking and just started to live and just said, I know God is there, and I know because another thing too, you got to understand, growing up in Flint, Michigan, there were so many things that were negative, that were crazy, that I missed, that I could see, I could feel protection. I know there were things there were voices that I listened to that I knew were guiding me the right way, even in the midst of all that darkness. I was comforted because I was seeking it. You know what I mean? And that's where I said, man, this is real, but I just don't want to get things mixed up. And let me tell you, I was actually in more than one church that, I had to end up leaving simply because the things got really misconstrued and very, very, culty, I would say, because the leader was great. And all the people start out with great intentions, the greatest intentions. But then a lot of things get really, really twisted. And that happens everywhere. That happens in sports. It happens in Hollywood. It happens in politics. I mean, people have the greatest intentions, and then you turn around and it's like, uh-oh, where did you miss that? And I'm gonna tell you, nowhere is that more true than in my own life and in my own family. And the things that I started out with these intentions and then turned around and I was in a really, really wrong place.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think you're describing a version. Yours sounds like an extreme version of a childhood a lot of listeners can relate to. I grew up with the idea that movies were bad. And now my parents watch movies. It's fine. They're still alive. We watch movies. That whole kind of legalistic, conservative bent where this was okay, but that wasn't. And the hypocrisy that even as a kid, you could see in some of the people in your church. And, I feel like my adult life has been trying to take the good of my childhood. I had a much more secure childhood, it sounds like, than you did, Terry. But also then trying to, my leadership is a reaction to that. I would never, that's one thing I decided early on in my ministry. I would never say God told me to build this or launch this. It's like, I prayed about it. I think he's directing it. But if this thing falls apart, give me the blame. Like, I'll take this one. Make it fall on me. Let's get into your personal story a little bit more. Because, when you grow up and you don't even call your parents mom and dad, that's a story for another day, but it's Big Terry and Trish, right? And there's a whole story behind that. And you were estranged for a little while from both of them, and you tell that story toward the end of your book, etc. But a home of abuse, your dad abused in one way, your mom abused in another, not safe on the street. Then all of a sudden you fall in love, you start your own family, you start your own career. How did that childhood start to show up dysfunctionally in your adulthood?
Wow. Yeah, man. First of all, one thing that I was exposed to very, very young, probably about 9 or 10 years old, was pornography.
Yeah.
And, when you're in a religious household, sex was not talked about. It was taboo. It was it was something that was, you hushed about it and you didn't say anything about it. And if you did, it was like, what, are you doing it? It was like, no, I'm not doing anything.
I don't even know what it is. How am I doing it?
No, first of all, it was viewed as bad. Like, it's not healthy. It's bad. And don't even think about it, And so I was never really explained to me. And then once I was taking flute lessons and I discovered a whole chest of pornography when I was 9 years old at my uncle's house while he was teaching me how to play flute, but he would leave and I'd wait to get picked up. And, he wasn't a Christian. He was just living his life. In fact, he lived most of his life high. So he would smoke and do all this stuff, but he had a bunch of pornography there. And man, I have to say, because of how early it came into my life, that it changed my wiring in a lot of ways. Because that's actually abusive. I mean, when you look at people who try to groom kids, whatever, the first thing they do is show them pornography. And the thing is that you can really change the makeup of someone's brain by seeing it too early. And the thing is that, and there's people who in the world who always say, hey man, pornography is cool as an adult and the whole thing. But I don't know anybody who ever encountered pornography as an adult. I don't know. I mean, every kid, you see it as a kid and it affects you immediately. And especially now, I mean, I look at what people see on their phones or whatever, but back then it was just magazines. And let me tell you, I was hooked. I was hooked. And then when cable came in and I found a way how to jimmy the cable box so I could watch porn. And you got to understand, here I am, and I saw myself as this card-carrying Christian young man, but I could not get this thing out of my life. And I mean, I would pray to God, I'll never do it again. I'll never do it again. And man, I'll go right back. And that shame cycle is what I would like to call it, would just keep spinning, man, because you do it and you feel bad. And then in order to feel better, you do it again. And it doesn't stop. And the shame just keeps going. And then you just accept it. You just say, I'm just flawed. I'm just broken, messed up. And I'll be lucky to get into heaven because I can't stop this. Because for one, it was a secret. I was not telling anybody. No one would know. And I'll be honest, anybody in my world didn't even want to hear it if I wanted to talk about it. You know, it was that kind of thing. Like, hey, man, look, you better not be doing that. I don't even want to hear it. So here I am, you know, a young man. I married this beautiful Christian woman Rebecca, who I literally met in church. She was a music minister at our church in Kalamazoo. And here I think my pornography addiction is over. It's done. I have a real woman now. That's finished. Thank you, God. I'll take it from here. You know. And then as soon as the argument happened, oh my God, I went right back. But it still was my secret. And it was my secret. I called it my dirty little secret for years and years and years, and through 20 years of our marriage. And it was something that even once I became an actor, I mean, I went all through the NFL, and what was so wild is that as the things started to develop, you know, I used to go to bookstores and do all this stuff and sneak around, and then when the internet hit, I was like, oh no, like it's in the house. It was a little bit like that move from magazines to cable. And so the internet's there, and I'm like, oh man, and I can't get this thing out of my life, right? So, but what happened is as I got out of NFL and went and became an actor and the whole thing, I also had imposter syndrome. So pornography was a thing that it's just like alcohol or just like any other thing where it numbs your pain. It just numbs you. It's something that will take you out of your problems for the moment. And what happened was as an actor, young actor, I was so intimidated, so feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in Vancouver all by myself, the whole thing. I actually went to a massage parlor and cheated on my wife. And I had been on a binge of watching porn and the whole thing. And I couldn't believe it was like the worst thing I could ever imagine. Like I said, I would never do these things, but it's inevitable when you bring this stuff into your life and in your head, you act out. That's just, you know, you start to accumulate. If you accumulate good things, you do good things. But if you start accumulating a lot of bad things come out. And I vowed I would never tell my wife. I vowed I would never, it was going to be my secret for life. I'm going to my deathbed with this thing. And literally from 1999 all the way to 2010. But what was happening is, you know, slowly but surely, my marriage is separating. You start to, you know, these things, the pornography will always put a brick between the relationship between my wife and I. And the thing is the thing I need was intimacy. And with intimacy, it's when you see someone, you know everything about them, and you love them anyway. Yeah. But the problem is, with the thing that I needed, I would never let my wife see me as I truly was. So it became a bigger brick. And it was always like to cover up the tracks. One lie would turn into another, that would turn into another. And mind you, I went to church. I called myself a Christian. I was this guy who went to church every Sunday and prayed, but I asked forgiveness every time I did it. But I couldn't break it. And man, finally my wife, she confronted me. I was in New York. She was in LA. We were on the phone, and she said, it came to this. She said, "What is it I don't know about you, Terry Crews?" And it snapped. Like, I was tired of the whole thing. And it was like, and I told her about pornography. I told her about the massage parlor. I told her about all this stuff. And then, you know, what's so crazy is that I was like, hey, see, now I told, and now, all right, I get my reward, and you're, now you have to stay with me. And she's like, I'm out of here. I'm done. What are you talking about? Like, I don't even know you. And I realized that there was no way. I mean, I had been giving her a picture of what Terry Crews is, this image, and that was what she was married to. Dude, it was over. My marriage was over. My life was over. And now, Carey, this is another thing. I was extremely successful. You got to understand, like, the world.
Where were you in your career
care
at that point, Terry? 2010?
Oh, man, the money was flowing, the opportunities, the shows, the love, the fame. I mean, I had no shortage of people telling me how great I was. And here was my wife, the most important person in my whole life, was like, I don't want anything to do with you.
Why?
And Hollywood doesn't care if you lose your family. They just don't. It's like, okay, now, well, we can put you in 3 more movies. You don't have to go home. You know what I mean? I'll just go from one set to the next. You know what I mean? And so that wasn't a problem. But the problem is that I was like, but who am I? Like, and the thing is, and then I flipped, Carey. It was just kind of a weird way to do it. I was like, hey, you know what? Fine. Let her go. I don't need her. I'll just find another woman. This is like the first divorce. This is how it works in Hollywood. Everybody gets their first divorce. So it was no big deal. And then I heard myself talking like that.
Wow.
And then I went, who is that? I was like, that's not even who I claim to be. Because you understand, all these years I've been claiming to be this guy who loves his wife, who loves his family, and I'm there. I'm like, get out of here. Then fine then. Not even worth fighting for. And I went, holy cow, it's me. It's me. This is me. Now, let me tell you, man, one of my the best advice I ever received in my entire life was given to me by Pastor Jim Reeve. Faith Community Church was the church I had been attending here it was in West Covina, California. And Jim and Marguerite Reeve are still, to this day, some of our best friends and confidants and counselors. I mean, we go to them. We were there just 2 weeks ago. Like, talk to us. Well, I like to call them our parents, our spiritual parents. And we talk, we can say anything to them. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said, and you got to understand, at this time, 2010, my wife had just left. I call him first. I'm like, Pastor Jim, I said, I lost my family, man. I'm a fake. I'm a phony. I'm fake. I'm nothing. The whole fake it till you make it. The problem is you make it and you're still fake. I was a fake. And I said, dude, what am I going to do? And the best advice I ever received, Pastor Jim, I'll never forget it. He said, Terry, I cannot promise you that you are going to get your wife and family back, but you need to get better for you. Now, Carey, this was different.
Yeah.
I was like, get better for me. Like, you got to understand, my whole life, I'd been doing things for Scooby snacks, for rewards, and to avoid punishment. That was the only reason to do things. I mean, I learned this back in Church of God in Christ, where you don't do it so you don't get caught. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the lesson that I learned. It was like, the reason you may not want to steal that is because you'll get caught. But what if you wouldn't get caught? Well, you know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's punishment, or you do good things for rewards. You put yourself out there so that you can get the reward of everyone thinking you're a great guy and you're so amazing and you're this and I would hold the door open for my wife when people were around.
Okay, gotcha.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, Terry. Yeah.
And it's like, and my wife would call me on it. You big phony. Like, you just noticed people were there. You're trying to get these rewards. And I'm like, hey, well, that's the way it is. Yeah. And I did things what I would call for Scooby snacks. You know what I mean?
I'm going to hang on to that metaphor. That's beautiful. External motivation versus internal, right?
Oh,
Scooby snacks.
dude, Scooby snacks, all external, just like a puppy, you know?
Hmm.
But me get better for me?
Wow.
Like, for real? And I went, that's all internal. There's no rewards. There's no punishment. There's nothing. It's like just to get better. And wait, dude, it blew my mind. And so I said, okay. And I went to this place called Psychological Counseling Services. Now, this is a place where pastors go to when they fall, where, athletes went to and they get caught up in all kind of sex scandals and this kind of stuff. So they've seen it all. They've heard it all. You know what I mean?
I do.
And I go in there and I'm just like, oh, this is not me. And it's like, it's an intensive where, you there and you like, you stay there for a whole week and you do nothing but counsel all day long. Because this is the thing, my wife was like, look, I'm going to have to see something, like you can't just tell, there is no, telling me you're going to be better and all this stuff. Like it's all action now, buddy. So I'll be over here and you just don't come home. And I was like, oh, all right. I'm going to do something. I got to do something. But see, when I realized that I had been two different people, I had a double life. I had this life that everybody saw, and then I had who I was. And I said, I got to find a way to be one person. So I go in there and I'm like, oh, this is messed up. This is not me. And then all of a sudden they said, was your dad an alcoholic? I was like, yeah, how did you know that? I didn't even say anything to you about that, And then, was your mom religious? I'm like, yeah, wait a minute. How did you know that? I didn't say anything. And wait, they started reading my mail, and this shame thing that was happening and all this stuff and the secret keeping and all this. And because they had heard all these people say this stuff before. And I started to see where I was two people. And I was like, this is where this thing is. And then the secrecy was the power of the addiction. Because I didn't share, I didn't take inventory, I didn't confess, I didn't really talk about it to anyone that loved me or truly trusted. Like, what's so funny is that if I would have came to my wife when we were married early on, right when we got there, and told her about all these things I was going through, she would have helped me through it.
I'm sure she would have. Yeah.
Considering what my past was and that I had been exposed to this stuff, she's been like, okay, let's go get help together. We can get this through this thing together, and we'll pray and we will work. You know what I mean?
I do.
But I never gave her that opportunity for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, how can I, you didn't even give me a chance. I didn't even know the real you. Man, let me tell you something. That was a long journey.
Yeah.
Carey, the tears, the angst, there were days where I couldn't get out of bed. There were days where I was like, everything is different. And, the only way I can really describe it is like you thinking that the sun revolves around the earth. And you're like, look, the sun, it rises in the east and sets in the west. It goes around us. And then you discover painfully, wait a minute, we go around the sun.
Yeah.
No. It had to be a flat earth movement. You know what I mean? Where you're like, wait a minute. If I keep going, I'll end up in the same place. Are you kidding me? Like, if I just keep going, we're going to go all the way around this thing? I mean, I'm sure. And that kind of thinking takes generations to get out. You know what I mean? Like, generation. In fact, if you even mention that that we go around the sun, that people put you in jail. You know what I mean? That was the reality. And I saw this world was not as it looked. And here I was, super successful, but I had everything backward. The internal Terry Crews was a mess. And I said, oh my God. And I said, I have to reverse this. I have to reverse. And so what I did, because of the secrecy and the whole thing, and again, I would never, ever, ever tell people to go public with their issues. I just wouldn't. But I would tell them to always find someone they love, someone they trusted, a counselor, someone that they really, really know and trust, that they can really talk to about their deepest, innermost problems and difficulties and addictions. Yeah. But for me, because I had already been in the public eye already, I was kind of built for the public eye. I've been in the public eye since I was, a teenager, literally, going into football and being this kind of guy. I said, I have to kill this image. I have to kill this golden calf that I had set up with Terry Crews's face. You know what I mean? And I said, man, and I went on, I'll never forget, this was all during, it started internally. It started with telling family members and talking about it. I remember calling up my brother and asking him, hey man, you grew up in the same house. Did you have these problems? And isn't it, and then it started to go out to wider into friends, and people were like, man, we were going to dinner with people, famous superstars. And I was like, I was addicted to porn. And they were like, okay, woo. Like, oh, you're talking, I like to call it the awkward stage. You know what I mean? Like, Carey, the awkward stage. People were like, all right, I got the check.
We're out of here. Look at the time. We got to go.
Yeah, whoa, okay. No one wanted to talk about that. Okay. And, but I couldn't stop. Like we talked to the kids. We were with the family, with the kids. This is what's wrong with dad. This is what happened with dad, and we broke it down to a way that they could, understand. But I had kids, of various ages. Right now, they're from 35 all the way to 16. But this was, 12 years ago. You know what I mean? So there were teens all the way down to little kids. And they were like, so you had a problem, Dad? I'm like, yes, I did. Yes, I did. And it was so hard. But as I kept doing it, it started to release. Like the whole thing, the power of what that addiction was started to get off me, because everybody knew. And it was accountability, and it was people, and they were like, oh, and it was like, whoa, you got to walk this because you're talking it now. You know what I mean? So you better walk. And then I said, wow, I got this early app called Facebook Live. And Facebook Live this was back in 2014. And I remember I was coming out of the gym and I felt like I got to do this. And I put the Facebook Live on, and now people can do lives on Instagram and live, but this is back in the early days, like, celebrities and people no one would ever let anybody into their house or talking. And I was in my car outside of the gym, and I was like, and it's a video you can see even to this day. And it's called Terry Crews' Dirty Little Secret. And I said, hey, I was addicted to pornography and it ruined my life. And I went into now my wife and I had already been through years of therapy. It was probably going on 4 years up to that point. And we had decided to regroup, had decided to come together. And again, with bumps and bruises all the way. And it was so great as Jim and Marguerite were there with us the whole time, and became our counselors and became our people that we could trust and share how we were feeling. My wife was like, I'm out of here. And Marguerite was like, I understand. And Jim, I'll go to Jim like, man, I don't think I can do it. He said, hey, I hear you. I know. But what are you going to do, Terry? I said, I know. It's so good. So listen, again, it's so good. I probably went long with this story.
No, this is great. And I mean, you're reading so many people's mails. And everything's a little bit different in everyone's life, but there is that really hard pressure. And I think you named it, Terry, that the outside is going great and you think this justifies or hides or compensates for everything. But on the inside, who you are. And, I think you called your book Tough. Would you say that up until what you call D-Day, that day that you confess to your wife, hey, there was that massage parlor and I have this porn addiction and this is the person you married, not what you think you married. Tough was defined as you're working out, you're a tough guy, you had an anger problem, you're going to keep people out. But tough is very different for you now. How would you define tough now? What is tough to you in 2022, Terry?
Tough now is the ability to really introspectively look at yourself, warts and all, for real, and be brutally honest. It's a little like self-surgery, There's a thing in Rambo when you see where, Stallone has to close up a wound on his own and he's sewing his own skin and he's like, or he's going to bleed out. You know what I mean? He knows he's going to die. And so there's this thing where, you look at these things where I've seen stories about people who had their arms caught in things, had to cut their own arm off, but that was to save their life. The definition of tough is like that. It's where the endurance, the ability to take this kind of pain in order to live, in order to have life, in order to give life, in order to be life. It's tough.
Yeah.
And the other way was actually the easy way out. I always looked at that kind of version of toughness was the ability to hold up a shell and keep that shell and let nobody see it. Actually, keeping the image up was considered tough.
Yep.
How can you keep the image? You know what I mean? And don't let anybody break that image. And the real thing about being tough was tearing that thing down and letting people see you as you truly are. And let me tell you, it's so relieving being one person now, Carey. Was what happens is the image falls, the double life falls away, and now it's one. And what's so wild is that I can go places and people know way more about me than I'll ever know about them, and I do not mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, there we go. Yes, that's it. That's Terry. That's me.
What doors has that opened for you? Like with the different kinds of conversations? Because I know Stallone is a friend of yours. You have all kinds of friends in Hollywood and a lot of other people in your life too. So since you've kind of come clean and come out and outed yourself, right? Said, here I am. This is who I am. These are the changes I'm making. Here are the steps I'm taking for a better marriage, to be a better dad, to be a better human, and just to be honest about it. Has that triggered conversations with other people who have started a similar journey, or where are people with your story now?
Oh, big time. I mean, first of all, one thing that I did realize, and which was really good, is that there were people that I needed to separate from. There were people who liked the image. And it was better than who I really was. And I lost a lot of friends. I used to have a voicemail that said, hey, hi, this is Terry Crews. I'm taking it to the next level and I'm not going back. Please leave a message. And some people would get angry. Like, where are you going? And I knew never to call those people back. Because I knew I was walking into an entirely new life. And the old couldn't come with me. The whole phrase about the wineskins.
Oh, yeah.
Old wine, new wineskins. It just doesn't work. You got to let that stuff go. And I actually there were things like I had to physically, it was almost like spiritually move. Even though I was still in LA, I moved. And there were things I didn't do. I had no interest in seeing or going or doing anymore. And And before back in the day, in the church that I was in, it was always spoke of as like, God save me. I didn't want that no more. I didn't need that no more, that kind of thing. But this was different. It was like, wow, I saw the reasoning, the insecurity, the stuff that I was trying to get out of certain things that never fulfilled me. And so I was like, but then once I started to find the things that were fulfilling, the real things that mattered the most, I didn't need the other stuff. Wait, once I found what real intimacy was, because this is the thing, I found it. The thing that touches me the most is my wife found out everything about me. Wait, and we had a thing called disclosure. You have to have, this is part of the technique of getting rid of addiction, is disclosing the things you did. Every last one of these things, as you can remember them. And my wife went through that with me every step of the way and loved me anyway. Like, that's true intimacy. You know what I mean? Like, our relationship is now going on 33 years. This happened right after our 20th anniversary. But now we're going on 33 years in July. And I look at how we're stronger than ever. We put out a book that's on Audible right now called Stronger Together, that if you want to hear her side of the whole story, you can hear it in her voice.
Well, I'll listen to that.
Of us going through the whole thing. And it's incredible. It's incredible. And, we are an example of a miracle.
Yeah.
But that miracle is faith without works is dead. Like, there's faith and work. And I'm just so thankful, man. I'm beyond grateful that I did get my family back, that I do have my wife back. And I'll have more than that. It's absolutely a new day for me. And every day is a new day. And this is why I'm so glad. And these conversations, believe you me, man, people pull me to the side. Like, man, how did you do that?
It's a big thing, Carey.
I get that a lot. And I'm like, that's a long story, but it probably take about an hour. I would like that about, the time we had here, Carey.
Oh, well, you and I have.
Yeah.
We've gone a little past time. You've been very generous, but
no, it's good.
Stop you.
I want to finish the story and do it right. But I have to say, man, I have heard it from people. And what's so wonderful about what this book has been able to do is, because the problem with celebrity is that people feel like you were always so special. Like, there was somebody who pulled you out of some, there was a golden spoon and there was this golden bed and silken sheets, and you were just, they raised you to the sun and said, it's like you are the Lion King. You know what I mean? No. If you look at my book, you can see the warts and all, and you can see, and it's my thing to kill that image so that you can see and let people know. Because this is another thing. The 12th step, out of the 12 steps, they find that if you don't do the 12th step, you probably will never get rid of the addiction. And the 12th step is to help others. That's the 12th step. And this 12th step for me has always been to be revealing, to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to show people what was done, to show how I overcame these things, and to help shine a light on how to get out of something that I was in for so many years. And to me, this is part of the completion of the 12th step.
Yeah. So leaders listening who might be where you were 12 years ago going, she doesn't know everything, or I feel like I'm an imposter. I've got a double life. What advice would you leave them with, Terry?
The biggest thing is if you have to ask yourself that question, you probably do. If there's things that your wife doesn't know, you're going to have to find out how you're going to explain these things, or your husband, to the females out there. And I would I would recommend the presence of a counselor, someone they're being a third party. They're being someone who's knowledgeable with relationships, knowledgeable with an experience in this, depending on what kind of or how far you've gone. But I would not recommend you just go home and start spilling your guts and this kind of stuff. I would not do that simply because you can do more damage. That's another thing. It's even in the 12 step, they have a phrase where, people want to admit their wrongs to other people, but you can't do that if it will cause them even more pain. So you have to really, really let someone, and this is why we have each other. You know what I mean? We are social animals. We are not meant to be alone. You're just not.
Truth.
You need, listen, as a married couple needs a ref. You need somebody.
We've needed a ref sometimes, Terry.
You know what I mean? Who can look outside and say, hey, wait, no, flag on the play. Flag on the play. We got to, and this was so crazy and unbelievable because people will feel like, yeah, you needed all that. Well, my wife had to go to counseling too on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was some enabling there. There was some of this, it was weird. There was things that she was like, wait a minute, I chose not to see some things. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, now look, that wasn't for me to say, but that was her. Those are her words. And these things came from her counselor and her person. And this is why we have churches. This is what the purpose of what the church is for. You know what I mean? So we can get through these things together. And I thank Jim and Marguerite Reed to this day because, the ability to be able to share our hearts. There were times we would get mad with right there in the counseling room. You know what I mean? And they listened and they understood. And what was so crazy is that it became much more clear when it came out of my mouth. And I'm going, wow. It wasn't like an answer out of the blue. It's more like, to me, it's never really about answers. It's about asking the right questions. One of the things I like to say is I used to say, why doesn't my wife believe me? But then when everything changed, the question became, why am I lying?
That's a better
Same
question.
context, two different perspectives. And it just, once you start asking the right question, why am I lying? Wow. Now we can start getting to the heat and get right into the center of what the issue is. And I'm just so thankful for Jim and Marguerite and good people that believed in us and still do. And I'm thankful.
Terry, I want to thank you for being so open and transparent and vulnerable. You're working on America's Got Talent these days, and you got your new book, Tough. And then Rebecca's book is called, what's it called? Stronger
Together.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that one out. I haven't heard that one yet.
It's on Audible. It's only on Audible, so it's a voice book, but it's
I will check it out. Anything else you're working on right now? You've always got like 5 projects on the go.
I'm actually in Tales of the Walking Dead, which is a zombie series, which is going to be great. It's coming out this summer.
That's fantastic.
I'm acting in that, and
Are you a zombie?
No. I'm a zombie killer, which is good.
Okay,
this is good. I was like,
yeah, you're built for it. You're built for it.
Yeah. And got a lot of things on coming soon that I can't talk about yet, but I'm so excited about, man. Oh, and I also have a Disney ride. I'm in the Guardians of the Galaxy Disney ride, Cosmic Rewind at Walt Disney World. I'm so happy to be a part of this, Americana. Fun. It's just so fascinating, man.
So you're on a Disney ride. That's pretty cool.
I know.
Not a lot of people get to say that, right?
Listen,
go see my ride at Disney.
I am blown away with that. This is where, I know for a fact that God has given me more than I could ever ask or think. I mean, we're so blessed. And I know for a fact that because of that change and all that tough work that was done years ago is why I'm able to enjoy this now. This is a fact.
And if people want, obviously, you're online. Do you have a website or anything like that? Or just find you on Wikipedia?
All the socials at Terry Crews, pretty much on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. It's just at Terry Crews.
Cool.
So you can check it out.
Terry, this has been fantastic and life-giving. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carey. Thank you for letting me talk. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for watching the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so. Share it with a friend and leave us a comment. And I've got 2 things I want you to do before you sign off today. Number 1, if you're a church leader, I would love for you to go out and visit hegetsuspartners.com/Carey. Click on the link, because here's what's happening. There's a $100 million campaign going on, basically sharing the gospel with the world. And if you become a partner for the He Gets Us campaign, here's what happens. People who are interested and respond to the ad get connected to your church. It's an opportunity for you to enter into dialogue, have a conversation with them, people who are really authentically exploring Christianity. So go to hegetsuspartners.com/Carey. And also, if you haven't yet checked out the Art of Leadership Academy, make sure you do so. The Art of Leadership Academy has over 150 high-quality, done-for-you resources for you and your team. Whether you're leading a church or whether you're leading a small business, you're an entrepreneur, it's done for you. I will train you in communication. I'll train you in team leadership. I'll train you in so many different things. We have PDFs, videos, downloads, cheat sheets, you name it, we've got it. It's ready to go. But it's beyond that. The Academy is also a community. I do live monthly coaching calls. We have an incredible community involved in daily dialogue. It is troll-free, and it's available for a very low membership fee every single year. Would love for you to check it out. Make sure you check out theartofleadershipacademy.com. Click the link and we'll see you inside there, because here's why I started it. I graduated law school. Nobody taught me how to run a law firm. I graduated seminary and nobody showed me how to run a church. Had to figure it all out. So that's why we created the Art of Leadership Academy. It'll help you lead and help you thrive as you do it. Thanks so much for watching the podcast. We'll catch you next time. And I hope our time together today has helped you thrive in life and leadership.